Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to Snaps. So excited for our guest right here. You know him. You love him. Chances are, since we kind of have an SEC bench to this show, you might hate him. It's Mr. Danny Kanell, FSU's finest. Danny, what's going on, man? Thanks so much for joining us.
T-Bob, what's going on, man? First time we've got to share the airwaves. Fired up for that. Me and Aaron, the last time we got to hang out together, we were winning championships out in the golf course. So we got good vibes out here. I really hope this is an opportunity to just extend an olive branch to all those SEC fans that are out there that may not have the highest opinion of me, because usually once we hash things out, I self-admittedly am a bit of a troll on Twitter, which gets me in trouble a lot. But usually, like, when we hash things out and I kind of make more sense of it and you kind of hear me explain some of my thoughts on the SEC. And I will say this too, I haven't been as critical as of the conference in its entirety as I was about 7 or 8 years ago, when I did feel like there was more overrated, calls from me. I haven't made that call in quite a while because they've been living up to the hype for sure.
When did this start? I want to know, like, when did this start? Did you just wake up one morning and just middle fingers to the SEC? Like, when I got into start?
So I'll tell you, Aaron. So when I got into broadcasting, it was probably 2008, 2009. Like, I called games on ESPN3. That's what they called it. It was like on the internet. And so like I started. So that was at the time when, it was starting to come around. SEC was good. Bama was starting to get good. Nick Saban had just gotten there. And then I'd say what kind of really set me off was the Alabama LSU rematch after the 9-6 game that took place, and Oklahoma State got left outside and looking in. They had one loss as well. And I was just like, wait a second, we pump the brakes. Like, are we sure these are the two best teams? Like, why does one team get a pass for a loss that wasn't exactly pretty, and another one gets a pass for a loss? I know it was Iowa State. We can go back and rehash history, but I was just like, let's slow down a little bit. Then it became like Bama, like it was me against Bama. And so really at the beginning of the Bama dynasty, my pushback against them was that they were too one-dimensional. I was like, they are awesome on the defensive side of the ball, but their offense is not very good. And Bama fans hated me for saying that, but I thought I was just pointing out the obvious. And so like that became the genesis of it, as I was, pushing back against the why is it just automatic LSU and Bama gets that rematch. Then it was, well, what are the, because the SEC used to rip apart the Big 12 for the lack of defense. And I'd be like, well, wait a second. They're playing against some elite level quarterback play and offensive philosophies that you don't see every week in the SEC. And so they'd be like, oh, well, they couldn't handle our physicality. But then all of a sudden in the last 6 or 7 years, as you've seen, and really you got to give Nick Saban credit for this, because he brings in Lane Kiffin, opens up the offense. And all of a sudden we see like the fullness of what Bama could be. And then because Nick Saban's a trendsetter, you see a lot of schools start opening up their offense. And then what do we see? Like a 51-48 shootout between Bama and Tennessee. I didn't hear whatever the final score was. I didn't hear anybody complaining about the lack of defense or mocking them the way that we used to mock the Big 12, right? Well, it's great football now. So like it's all come around full circle, but I think it's great. Like, and I think the SEC has come a long way as far as offensive philosophies, and it's been awesome. I never ripped Georgia's offense though, Aaron.
Look, it's
a good balance. It's a good balance.
Right. You guys were balanced. Yeah.
We're very balanced.
So what Danny's telling you, it never came from a place of hate. He just wanted to motivate you to be better. He's actually responsible for us getting 51-48 last year.
I deserve credit.
Yeah, exactly, dude. Okay, how about this? So I know you just went through this a bit recently, where FSU softball makes the finals against the behemoth that is Oklahoma, and then you got to go play in Oklahoma City. Should the SEC championship be moved out of Atlanta? It is absurd that the Georgia Bulldogs can have a place, especially with Nashville. Vandy's never going to make it. Like, it is absurd that the Georgia Bulldogs get to play a home game every time they make it to the SEC championship.
I hear what you're saying, T-Bob, but how far of a drive is it from Baton Rouge?
To New Orleans.
Yeah. No. It's an hour from there. But I'm saying from Baton Rouge, if you were a diehard, or from New Orleans to Atlanta, how far a drive is that?
It's about 8 hours. 8 hours from Baton Rouge.
That's not easy.
Yeah.
That's not easy.
No.
Alabama's played in there. Was it 2 or 3 hour, 4 hour, maybe Auburn, so some of the teams that have played in it, Florida has had to drive up there to play it. Not when Georgia's there. I don't have as big of a problem because it's drivable. So here was my personal experience with the softball World Series. So I was waiting to see if Florida State made the finals. Like, I didn't want to go out there. Not everybody has the luxury of going out to Oklahoma City for 9 days to support your team, right? Like, we got to work.
Yeah.
So as soon as they made the final series versus Oklahoma, I was like, oh, I might go out there. My guy, Dusty Voracek, he's an Oklahoma guy. I could go out and see him, root on my Seminoles. I'm like, let me check out the flights. I go check out flight. It was $1,600 for coach, like back of the bus. I'm sitting there with my legs, my knees up in my chin. And it's not an easy flight. There was layovers. Then I probably could have stayed with Dusty, but if I was just a fan, I would have had to find a hotel room, which is probably elevated rates during the college, softball World Series. It would have been probably a $4,000 trip by myself. That doesn't even include my family or my 3 daughters who I like to bring. So ultimately, I was like, it's too much. But for an Oklahoma fan, they can go, oh, time does the game start? Let me hop in my car.
Yeah.
It's within a 2 to 3 hour drive. So I think as long as things are drivable, then there's an excuse. Now, if you're an LSU fan and you're there every single year, I could see it becoming an issue where, yes, I think they should consider moving it around. I would say, yeah, let's rotate that bad boy. Let's put it in Nashville.
No. It's perfect. Georgia's a melting pot. We got Auburn fans and Alabama fans and Georgia fans.
That is true.
It's the biggest city in the Southeast. There's plenty of different people here. I want to go back to the ACC, SEC, somewhat hatred from your side. If this scenario happened, if there wasn't this whole grant of rights prohibiting the ACC from maybe essentially imploding on itself, where would you want to see those teams go? If tomorrow they figured it out, we can get out of this crazy ass deal that is around for another 10 years.
Yeah.
Where would you want Florida State and Clemson to go?
The ACC television deal is probably the worst deal in the history of sports.
It's impressive.
It really is. Like, it's unbelievable how restrictive it is, the length of it. Like, come on, man. Like, what are we doing? And I don't like to rip John Swofford because he was I liked him as a man. And I feel bad for Jim Phillips, the new commissioner of the ACC, because he's inherited this. And I think he would even explore options if they were available. There just aren't any. My first choice, Aaron, would be to stay in the ACC if you could stay competitive. But I don't think long-term it is a viable option if things stay the same. Because Florida State, Clemson, Miami, with some of their booster help, you could fund an NIL program that could keep you somewhat competitive with Bama and Georgia and Ohio State and Oklahoma, some of the teams in the Big Ten, the SEC. But at some point, your boosters are either going to get exhausted from giving or they're going to run out of money, like one or the other, and probably both. So you could string this thing along, but over 10 years, and the money that's coming into the SEC and the Big Ten is about double, right? If you do the math, you're trying to, and college football is, and it always has been, an arms race. Like, who can spend the most, whether it's above board or under the table. Like, it's always been that way, whether it's facilities, whether it's bagmen, whatever it is. It's just been a spending race, and who can accumulate the most talent. And so if that's what the game is about, you can't compete with those programs. So in the current stat and where we are now, if I could pick, say, heck yeah, let's go with the SEC. Like, I want to be where the future of college football resides, and where Greg Sankey took this conference with the addition of Oklahoma and Texas and with the TV deal that he negotiated. Them or the Big Ten are the future of college football. And the Big Ten, hey, if we went to the Big Ten, I'd kind of like it because then I could even embrace that heel roll even more and lean into it. But I really don't think it's a good fit. I think Florida State's fan base, the atmosphere on game day, the rabid, passionate, fan base, I think it does fit better with the SEC. Regionally, it makes a lot more sense. And that's why I think you see FSU, Clemson compared, because top to bottom, and I'll say this as an ACC guy, we don't come anywhere close to matching game day atmosphere, to matching the passion of the fans, the willingness to travel. But at the very top, at some of the schools, we do have that passion and that fan. So if it's a better fit, I'd be all for it.
Let's talk about FSU then, because help me out here, Danny. When I look at last year's team, Obviously, the huge statement win against LSU to start the season, crazy game, but like a rough start, right? Kind of 3-3 overall. Then bam, catches fire. Jordan Travis, incredible. Led the country in QBR, 91-1, which is like such a hard number to hit. You know better than I do. Over that winning streak. Is Mike Norvell in this program? Are they like legitimately back, or is this just a hot streak? Like, was it just a nice run of play, or do you think that things are actually shifting in Tallahassee?
I think it could be both. I'm a big believer in not only momentum, like belief, and belief in what a coach is telling you, what a program is about, what a program has been. You will absolutely, positively never hear me say Florida State is back. I don't want that term because I see it mocked with Texas.
Yeah,
with,
true.
I see Sam Ellinger, we're back. Like, I will never say that. Miami, I have fun with them, asking them every year, are you guys back? Are you sure you're back? And they're not, they're another 500 year. So like, you will never hear me say that. But like Mike Norvell has said, no, we're always in an effort to get back to the standard that, he's got a great like cliche coach line about we're going to be back competing for championships. That's when we know we're back. But I am more cautious than most Florida State fans, I think, and maybe even some analysts, because when you do dive deep into last year's schedule, the 3 losses, Clemson, Wake, and NC State. The NC State game you probably should have won, but you didn't. Like, it's a fact. Like, you lost that game. And then to finish out the year, like, Miami's a big rival, but Miami's not a great win by any means. And I was there. It was a blowout. Like, it was a great win for Florida State, but it wasn't that big of a win as far as in the bigger landscape of being able to compete for national championships. Florida was not a great half, and it was in our backyard, and we kind of, we made it closer than we would have liked, and they weren't a very good team. And then Oklahoma in the bowl game was another 500 team that we didn't play great against and eked it out, but we won. So I'm still looking at this team like, all right, why didn't we handle our business versus Florida and Oklahoma and blow them out the way we should have? So it's like a reason for cautious nature. But why I can totally get into the optimism around the program is the mentality that those wins, even as maybe they weren't as significant as you'd like, the mentality of, okay, Jared Verse is coming back. Jordan Travis is talking guys into not transferring and recruiting guys and getting in transfers like Keon Coleman or Brandon Fisk, the defensive lineman. Like, they're bought in on what they could be this season. So I think that mentality is huge. And just like last season, when I thought the LSU game was huge, like the winner of that game, what it could propel them to be, I think it could be the same this year.
Yeah.
And I think the good news is last year I was much more worried. Like, if we would have lost to LSU, boy, what a setback that could be. If we lose to LSU, I'm not that worried because they've overcome losing before. So I don't think it's as big as an issue. They've shown maturity, where last year I think it would have been a little bit more concerned if they would have lost that game.
So let me play the scenario for you. We're big Colorado believers on this show. We're big Deion fans on the show.
Yes.
Yes.
We're all about.
We're all about
Prime. Time out.
We're all about Prime.
Give me a record,
Danny.
Give me a prediction.
You know, Prime moves
5 wins.
Okay.
5 wins.
T-Bob's already put money on it. He's already got the over of the 4.5. So he's feeling the 5. I'm kind of with him too here.
Okay.
But let me just play this out. Deion is a success at Colorado. He just got 2 4-star guys, a guy from Florida, from Tampa, receiver. I mean, he's getting recruits. If Colorado is a success in 3 years, say they're a 9-10 win team, they're competing in the Pac-12 or Big 12, whatever happens. What does Mike Norvell have to be in 3 years to keep his job?
Competing for ACC titles. He's got to have played an ACC championship, probably won one, which at that time, after 2024, that'll put you in the playoffs. Like, so if he's in the playoffs, I think he's fine. And I would anticipate that to be the expectation. I love how you clarified that, because I would be willing to take the bet with either one of you guys under 4.5. If you guys want to take it, we put a little action on it. I'll go under. But long term, I do think Deion's going to succeed. Like, I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors with Deion that is part of prime time and part of who he is. But I think underneath it all, he's a really good coach.
Yes.
And I think he's kind of old school, like behind, like he holds him to a high standard. He's not afraid to get in your face. He's not afraid to chew you out. And I think that can work. And I think that's something that a lot of kids are starving for today, that they need, to be coached hard. And he's open and upfront about that with them. So I think he will succeed. But I think there's plenty of space. This is a total cop-out answer. I think there's totally plenty of space for Mike Norvell to succeed at Florida State and Deion to succeed at Colorado. There you go.
We'll see.
We don't see him being at Colorado in 4 years.
I don't either.
Oklahoma
I don't
or Texas.
know.
Yes, Oklahoma, Texas, or Florida State. Deion's going to one
or Alabama.
Right. I don't know about Bama. He could, maybe. I mean, he could, if he turns this program around and it works just like it did in Jackson State. And with USC, UCLA leaving, he could be, who knows where, if they're going to be in the Big 12 or wherever they're going to be, but I would expect them to compete for conference titles within 3 years. He'll have a lot of opportunities. And I think, like, if he can recruit to Boulder, which is a great college town. I lived in Denver. I love Colorado. I don't know if it exactly is an easy place to recruit to because of how hard it is to travel to, and what I love in a school and a city and atmosphere may not be what a lot of these kids look for. Like, imagine what he could do at a traditional powerhouse with backing. That's, he's going to have some success raising NIL funds, but imagine what he could get at a place that like really was all in with Deion.
Speaking of Colorado, I saw Joel Klatt talking that shit online, Danny.
Yeah, right?
If you and Joel were to square up, who's coming out of the octagon? Who's winning that fight?
Joel is, I don't know if he's like a CrossFit guy or he's probably, he lives in LA. He's probably a Pilates guy. I'm a little more brute strength. I mean, I got that old dad strength too. I think I could take him down. I think he'd probably be a little, I can play a little dirty if I have to.
Hell yeah.
Where I want to get him on the golf course. That's where we'll settle everything.
Is he a golfer?
Like real men. Let's celebrate it on the,
is he a golfer?
Let's settle it on the golf. Oh, is he a golfer?
Oh, really?
Really? Like that?
All you have to do is ask him. He'll go. He'll like, go. Well, he was a part of the US Open golf coverage when he was at Fox. Yeah. He is a really good player. I'd have to get out in the range a lot. Like, he's a scratch to plus
smoke it,
one.
T-Bob.
He's good.
Who's a bigger villain in college football between you and Joel Klatt?
Yeah, I think y'all both ended up in our villain tier list, but I mainly put you there. Well, mainly because you wear turtlenecks. And if James Bond has taught me anything, like wearing turtlenecks is, it's pretty fuckety. Like, that's pretty evil.
He's on a much bigger platform than I am. So he has to kind of toe that line a little bit better, where I can cut loose a little bit more. Yeah. I can take a little bit more risks. I can, I'm older. I can, I'm not as much worried about the reputation. I don't have to go into coaches meetings and deal with them, when I'm doing a production for a game. So I don't have to worry about a lot of that. So I can get a little looser than Klatt. But so the reason I get mad at him, and I've done this publicly on Twitter, so I don't have a problem saying it here, is when he gets his Ohio State pom-poms out during a broadcast. It's like, come on, man, just dial it back just a little bit, right? Like, but it's kind of, hopefully we get, and I don't think we'll have to do this, but he works for Fox, he covers Ohio State, and it's just human nature to develop relationships, to talk to the opponent's coaches, because when you talk to anybody else in the Big Ten, if they're playing against Ohio State or Michigan, those guys are unbeatable. They're so good that you're going to relay those messages, over the broadcast. So I think it's human nature as well. And I mean, to his credit, Ohio State's been really good. They just haven't been good enough to win the national title or beat Michigan, but they've been his team.
I mean, okay, well then, just random tangent here. What, in your view, what is holding Ohio State back from that?
Michigan. I mean, that's a pretty significant issue.
But how, when, like, okay, your guy Bud Elliott covered the podcast. He'll do a great job. He created the blue chip ratio. Everybody loves blue chip ratio. And it's a great range finder for which coaches should we be giving credit to and which should we be kind of shitting on, right?
Yep.
And you're not shitting on Ryan Day, but like Jim Harbaugh's overcoming a pretty big raw talent disparity. Like, how were they able to do that and hold back Ohio State?
You know what I love about it is that Harbaugh came in, and remember he brought in Josh Gaddis, and he was flirting with and Shea Patterson, and he was flirting with, let me try some of these new concepts on offense. And he saw that it wasn't working. And he quickly went back to what he knows best. And he started running more two tight end sets, more big personnel groupings. He'd bring in an extra offensive lineman. He takes over play calling. Sherrone Moore, their offensive coordinator, their offensive line guy. And he's like, no, we're not falling for that fluff. We're going to run the ball right down your throat. And that's kind of what's worked against Ohio State. Yeah. They have physically imposed their will on the Buckeyes on both sides of the ball. And like, that's been Ohio State's problem the last couple of years. They've had high-powered offenses. They've had defenses that have a lot of 4 and 5 stars on them, but they have not been able to match the physicality of Michigan. And that's the sole reason why they haven't been able to beat them. And I think it's great because that's what the sport of football is about. And if you hear Jim Harbaugh talk about the sport of football, like you see like his eyes start to glow and he gets this intensity level and he talks about, you know, the old school mentality, and it's worked. I think it's a great lesson that a lot of coaches can learn because the rules are so beneficial to offenses and throwing the football. But I think there's more of a trend coming back to, man, you can still run the ball down people's throats and just manhandle people. And Michigan's been probably one of the best teams in the country to do it.
Well, you saw Georgia do that with what they do on offense, what they do on defense. Alabama's going to try to go back to that this year, I'm sure, and we'll see if it works for them. I want to go back to this whole Big 12 SEC thing when it comes to just the two teams coming to the SEC. Obviously, you work with Dusty every morning on SiriusXM. You also do, what's it called? Your show on Mad Dog in the afternoon as well. He's an Oklahoma guy. Obviously, Texas right now maybe is better positioned to make the transition next year. How do you view those two teams heading into the SEC, and which one in your mind could have success early on and for a long time?
I think it's going to be tough, right? I mean, it's not going to be easy. I mean, everybody knows that. Texas clearly has more momentum right now, but put yourself back a year ago. Even before Brent Venables, like even when he was the head coach, but they hadn't played a game yet, you probably would have said Oklahoma because Texas was coming off 5-7, a loss to Kansas. You're like, what is happening there? I don't know. I do think this year it's huge for Oklahoma. I don't think it's as big for Texas. I think they'll probably be good again. It's just a matter of how good they'll be. But Oklahoma has to gain some ground and build that confidence. Kind of, we were talking about Florida State, and you know, they're coming in with a lot of confidence. Oklahoma has to get to a place where they build up their confidence and the fans build up their faith in Brent Venables to where it was when they hired him and they were trying to talk themselves into this is better than Lincoln Riley, which
sad.
It's easy to make fun of, but like they kind of had to, right? You kind of have to have that mentality. Right. Yeah. So, but like for them, I think it's going to be a ruder awakening for Oklahoma because they were used to 10, 11, 12 win seasons for a long time, like going all the way back to Bob Stoops. Texas has had a lot of ups and downs. They've been battered. They've been through a lot of coaches. Oklahoma hasn't. So I think it's going to be tougher for Oklahoma, but I think the expectation is probably the same. Like I think there'll be 8 or 9 wins. And if they get a really special quarterback like a Baker Mayfield or potentially like a Quinn Ewers could be or an Arch Manning could be, then they've got a chance to get 10, 11 and compete for conference championship. But I think the early expectation would probably be 8 or 9 wins to kind of see where they've come out in the wash. Like I don't think they're going to be 500 coming in.
No,
I wouldn't be shocked if they are, but I think 8 or 9 wins.
I mean, if they are 500, Brent Venables should be fired. Right? I mean, it's like going 6 and 7
in the SEC.
I'm talking about if this year, if he goes 500 or less again this year, going 6 and 7 in that conference with that roster is akin to a war crime. Oklahoma had 24 winning seasons in a row previous to that. In the last dozen years, they had 2 seasons which they didn't win 10 games. And all the guys, the guy who's never been a head coach for shows up and wins 6. I would be crapping my pants if I was Dvorak or any of these Oklahoma guys.
And there's a lot of optimism. I think they'll have a strong bounce back season. And I saw a lot of this at Florida State with Norvell after the Willie Taggart. Like there's a culture change. And I think Brent Venables came in and he is a high energy, physical, defensive minded coach, which is the polar opposite of what Lincoln Riley is, right?
True.
I think it was a shock to the system of a lot of players on that roster. Like, whoa, like, wait, what? This isn't what I signed up for. So I think that was a tougher transition for a lot of players. But then you got to weed out some of those guys. You got to be like, all right, if you're not here for that, then go ahead, pack your bags, go somewhere else. I think you'll get better buy-in. I think they'll be better this year. So I don't expect them to have another 500 year, but you are 100% right. If they are 500, I think you'll probably see a change unless they say, let's give it 1 year in the SEC. Oof. And if you're 500 this year in the Big 12, then you're probably looking at sub 500 in your first year in the SEC.
Yeah. Do you want to fire a coach before they go to the SEC? That's my big worry. But
I mean, but would you want to take a bad coach into the SEC though? I mean, it's kind of
I think you give him 1 year in the SEC.
Though. Yeah, I think you give him 1 year.
Yeah.
Where are you on Sark? Because T-Bob just is like the biggest.
He's never won 10 games.
He hates Sark.
I love Sark.
10 games.
I'm with you, Danny.
Now, but I think you could go and you could be a hater of Texas easier because they have been a dumpster fire. Like, you see them all of a sudden, like another top 5 recruiting class. Talent has never been their problem. It's kind of like the Ohio State, Michigan dynamic. Like Texas just hasn't been very tough, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So like for me, that's Sark's biggest challenge. And it ekes back into the Mac Brown, the end of the Mac Brown era and why he was run off, which I still think they probably cut ties with him too. I love Mac. Like I'm biased towards Mac, but I think they ran him off probably too soon. He missed on some quarterbacks. Like that was what happened. But there was an era of entitlement where you just got a lot of 4 and 5 stars. They come in there. They don't really understand the work that it takes. They're not ready to deal with adversity. And that kind of mentality is carried over. Every coach has tried to get rid of that, but I don't know what it is about being in Austin. There's distractions. There's a lot. It's one of the prettiest, nicest campuses with the greatest amenities you could see out there. They're just kind of soft and they don't play up to their potential.
Yes.
So that to me, like if you want to like criticize somebody at Texas, it's the Texas program, but I do think like when you saw, like I do like some of their staff, like a Bo Davis, their defensive line coach, who's on there chewing out their players and trying to get after them. I think they're aware of it. They're trying to get tougher. And if you go back last year, Texas versus Bama, before Quinn Ewers got hurt, it was like, oh my goodness, they are on. Cool. Year before that, LSU, was it 2019 LSU game? They had LSU on the ropes. Then
their defense was great last year. Were they second in the?
They finished second in the Big 12. Yeah, I didn't realize that. I looked it up today. They actually, they gave up 21 a year, second in the Big 12. So their defense was pretty frisky.
Yeah,
last year.
So I can't believe I'm going to do this, but I probably will end up picking Texas in the Big 10 or in the Big 12 to win it because I do think there's a lot of talent. I think they'll live up to it this year, but I don't think they'll make the playoff because I think they could be 10-2. In the top of the Big 12.
Completely fair. Danny Kanell, the legend at Danny Kanell on Twitter, of course, hosts Dusty and Danny on Sirius XM 84. He's on Mad Dog Radio, the Cover 3 podcast, does a bit of everything. And he's the man who's getting ready to travel to Orlando to watch the LSU Tiger beat that Florida State Seminoles ass here in less than 100 days. How we feeling, Danny, on the way out here? Give us a little LSU FSU.
Are you going to be there? Because I'll be there.
Yes.
And we're going to have some sort of, we got to do something. We already have a bet on Colorado. I got the under. We'll have to have something on this game. You and your boy Hester.
We'll
have a bet. I think it's going to be a great game. Last year though, I will remind you that although it came down to a blocks extra point, it could have been a 2-touchdown blowout. Easy.
Yeah. Which is why I thought that Florida State was going to suck. Because LSU had no right being in that game. And they run like toss dive from the 1. They fumble. Like you did the only thing that allowed LSU an out in the game whatsoever.
I had no problem with the play call. It was all about the execution. I've run a toss sweep on the goal line before. It's not that big of a deal. I had no problem with the play call. You just have to execute. It's going to come down to physicality. I think it's going to come down to conditioning because my goodness, I don't care what time of day it is. If it's 9, 10 o'clock at night when it finishes, the dudes are going to be dropping like flies from cramps. I think it's going to be a fourth quarter game. I think Florida State's going to pull it out.
Okay, there we go, boys.
Jordan Travis's Heisman campaign gets kicked off with a bang.
No, I'm with LSU. I got LSU.
Wait, what? Wait, you just changed. You've been saying that you thought that Florida State was going to win, but okay, never mind. Hell yeah, dude. Right. Welcome.
Maybe prior to covering the LSU spring game, but when I watched LSU spring game, I was like, good God, it's a good football team. It's a really good football team.
Well, thankfully, boys, we're just a couple months away before we're going to find out in real life in Orlando. Football season, right around the corner. We love it. Danny, thank you so much, man. I mean, I know you're very busy, man. You stayed on with us forever. Thank you. And we look forward to doing it again in the future, man.
Definitely, man. Great being on with you guys.